All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take. Sharp and Shapiro. So glad you could join us on a Friday. You just heard some of the comments. We spoke about some of the comments that Mike Pompeo made this morning in his press conference, echoing what he said last night on Laura Ingram's show. Don't know when, don't know where, but yet this is still an imminent threat. This was an imminent threat. What better person to have on the line than this guy? He's a congressman who served 4 tours in Iraq. He won the Bronze Star Medal for his bravery, a former presidential candidate. Seth Moulton joining us right now on the line. Seth, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Hey, great to be back. I'm good.
Really appreciate it, Seth. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, what's up, Seth?
Before we get to the comments of Pompeo and this alleged imminent threat, I want to play you some audio from Representative Doug Collins speaking about Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic reaction to the death of this general. Here it is.
I did not think she could become more hypocritical than she was during impeachment. But guess what? Surprise, surprise. Nancy Pelosi does it again, and her Democrats fall right in line. One, they're in love with terrorists. We see that. They mourn Soleimani more than they mourn our Gold Star families, who are the ones who suffered under Soleimani. That's a problem.
In love with terrorists. Nikki Haley and Stephanie Grisham also have echoed those same thoughts. Seth, what are your thoughts on that when you hear people say things like that?
I mean, it's absolutely disgusting and it's totally absurd. I mean, Doug Collins never served his country, and saying things like that, it's just totally obnoxious. And Doug Collins also isn't very smart about national security, because if he were, he would realize that this was a stupid move, that it's actually made America less safe. Look, I hate Soleimani. I'm not mourning his death I'm not mourning his death one bit. Thrilled that he's gone. I mean, he killed some of my buddies in Iraq.
Right.
I don't remember Doug Collins being around there when we were fighting Iranians on the ground in 2004. So I get this. I get this a lot better than he does. But it's stupid to take someone out when it just creates more problems than it solves. And that's the whole issue here. Of course he's an evil guy. Of course he's got American blood on his hands. But you got to be smart in how you fight a war. And I remember a similar situation where we had a Soleimani-like figure. He was an Iranian-backed governor on the ground down in southern Iraq in 2005. And this guy was awful. Trust me, I wanted to kill him. But my team of Marines made a strategic decision not to take him out, because we thought that it would create more problems, build more terrorists, expand his network if he became a martyr. And that's exactly what Trump has done with Soleimani. He's made him into a martyr. And it's been, look, we've had to call off our counter-ISIS campaign because of this strike.
Right.
How is that helping American security?
It's interesting. The White House isn't really talking about that. They don't want to talk about that. All right, so let me ask you this, Seth. I know that there's some things you can't say in some of these briefings that I would imagine you've sat in. We had Dina Titus on yesterday, and she said she was not satisfied with the briefings she's had, and it echoed what Pompeo said today, that we don't know when this imminent threat was going to happen. We don't know where, but it's still an imminent threat. Have you been satisfied at all with the briefings you've received? Have they given you any information where you can say to yourself, you know what, this was the right thing to do?
Okay, wait a minute. So we don't know anything about when this threat is going to happen or where it's going to happen.
Right.
It's imminent?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's nuts. I mean, just listen to what he's saying himself.
Yeah.
All right? This document needs to be declassified. In fact, the whole reason it's classified is crap, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I can't tell you why. There's a specific reason. There's literally like a few words in it that are classified, and the rest of it is unclassified. The whole thing should be unclassified, or just take out the classified part, because every American needs to know exactly what this so-called imminent threat was and what it is not.
Don't you think that as someone who served, sending these troops in harm's way, what about the families? Don't you think they deserve a little bit more information than just, well, this was an imminent threat, even though we don't know when, we don't know where, this was a bad guy? I mean, what about the families of those who served? I mean, you served yourself. Don't you think, forget about just the everyday American, what about the heroes and the families that are serving right now? I mean, to me, that's who I think about first here.
Well, this is exactly why our founders, people like George Washington, who, by the way, know a hell of a lot more about fighting in war than chicken hawk Republicans like Doug Collins.
Right.
That is why they put the responsibility for going to war with the Congress. They put that in the Constitution. They said Congress, the representatives of the American people, and by the way, of our troops and their families, are going to make the decision about whether or not we go to war. There are specific exceptions for the commander-in-chief to take action, like a national emergency, an imminent threat. That's why we're talking about whether or not this was an imminent threat. But otherwise, it's the Congress's responsibility. Now, let me tell you, I'm a member of Congress, and we haven't always lived up to that responsibility. On both sides of the aisle, we have failed to have this debate. I was calling for the debate about whether to go to war with Iran or whether to authorize it a few months ago when we were doing the debate around we were passing the National Defense Bill. I said we should have, as part of that bill, a decision on whether or not we authorize war with Iran, because obviously it's coming with the way the administration's policy is going here. But, leadership on both sides said, oh, no, this is too contentious. Let's not discuss that now. Well, here we are. Because we didn't have that debate, we have this commander-in-chief going off on his own, and it's dangerous for our troops. It's dangerous for our families. And ultimately, if we're calling off the fight against ISIS, it's dangerous for our national security.
So as a result of the death of Soleimani, Congress and Pelosi has recommended a bill called the War Powers Resolution Act. And what that does is it prevents Donald Trump from just going to war without having Congress's blessing, so to speak. Exactly how much does that hamstring the president?
Well, it doesn't hamstring him any more than he's been. It just follows the Constitution. I mean, every president, has to follow the law. I know this president doesn't seem to think he does, but that's the way this works in America. You follow the law, you follow the Constitution, and the War Powers Resolution just reinforces that. And by the way, if the president really thinks that we need to go to war with Iran, or if this guy Mike Pompeo there thinks we need to go to war with Iran, then have him come and make that case to Congress.
Right.
We don't want to be politically embarrassed. Like, if this is a national security threat, you're going to find Democrats and Republicans, and maybe not every single person, but Democrats and Republicans saying, all right, this is serious. We need to go to war. But the point is, that's how the process works, and it works that way for a reason.
Seth, in regards to this War Powers Resolution, are you surprised that Matt Gaetz voted and sided with the Democrats on this one? And there were several other Republicans, correct me if I'm wrong, that voted this way as well. Matt Gaetz is taking a lot of flack from Republicans, not because it was the wrong vote, but they're saying, well, you voted against Donald Trump and for Nancy Pelosi. It appears to me they care more about that than doing the right thing. But what are your thoughts on Matt Gaetz and the way he voted?
Anybody who says that Matt Gaetz voted against Donald Trump and for Nancy Pelosi is reducing this to a political question.
Right.
When it's a question about national security, it's a question about the United States Constitution, and it's a question about the lives of our troops. So don't let anybody get away with characterizing this in political terms.
Yeah.
They're politicizing something that's far more important than this. Yeah. I admire the political courage of Matt Gaetz. Look, I don't agree with Matt Gaetz on much, but I admire his courage here because he did the right thing. There are a lot of other Republicans who know that he did the right thing, but they're just more scared of the president than he is.
You're absolutely right. Let's go back to Donald Trump here for a second. And by the way, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Congressman Seth Moulton. So this was Donald Trump in a rally last night in Ohio explaining why he didn't tell Democratic lawmakers about plans to kill this general.
They want us to tell them so that they can leak it to their friends in the corrupt media.
What do you make of those comments of Donald Trump and why he didn't tell you guys about this beforehand?
He's required to tell a group called the Gang of Eight, leadership on both sides of the aisle, including people like Mitch McConnell, who does the president's bidding, and who he failed to tell if he's going to take action like this. Mm-hmm. There has never been a case in history of the Gang of Eight leaking intelligence like this. Mm-hmm. Never. But I'll tell you what, there has been a lot of cases of, and that is our own commander-in-chief, President Trump, leaking classified intelligence. We have never had a president of the United States in history who has had more classified leaks than this president. So talk about hypocrite.
And so is he required to still talk to the Gang of Eight when the person that he's trying to kill is actually considered a terrorist like Soleimani was by the United States government?
That's a really good question, Jay. That's a good question. In this case, yes, because he was such a high-ranking government official that it's not the same as just any other terrorist. And the implications, which, by the way, the Intelligence Committee fully knows this, and I'm sure briefed the president, are much bigger. In other words, Iran's reaction is not going to be just any other terrorist getting killed.
Right.
This is bringing us to the brink of war.
So, Seth, I want to ask you about this plane crash, this plane that went down that I believe killed 167 completely innocent people. U.S. Intel says it was shot down by accident. Iran is denying it. Representative Jackie Spears said that this crash is collateral damage. I want you to listen to what she said and then comment on it. Here it is.
if what is being projected is true, this is yet another example of collateral damage from the actions that have been taken in a provocative way by the President of the United States.
So, Seth, my question to you is, do you think partially you can hold President Trump responsible for this plane that was shot down?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with my colleague Jackie on this. I respect her a lot, but I think that this is clearly Iran's fault. It's Iran's mistake. And this is a place where Democrats and Republicans need to come together and just condemn Iran for killing a whole bunch of innocent civilians. So as much as I disagree with the president and his actions here, how I think they're stupid for our national security, I think it's going a step too far to blame us when Iran accidentally shot down a civilian airliner.
Seth, you've been on the front lines. You're a war hero. And obviously you're against this attack and the killing of this general for obvious reasons, and I agree with you. With that being said now, what do we see now looking forward? In your estimation, could this be World War III? Do you think that this puts...
No, that's just ridiculous exaggeration. But
okay.
And I think it's important to call that out. But look... I'm thrilled this guy's dead. Let me get it clear, okay? This is an evil, evil man. But our decision to take him out like this was just a stupid move that could bring us to the brink of war. And by the way, we've been talking about Iran for 10 or 15 minutes now. We haven't once discussed what the administration's own national defense strategy says is the greatest threat to America, which is China.
Right.
We haven't talked about Russia, which has all these nuclear weapons aimed at us. Those are the main threats to the United States of America. And if we get bogged down in another war in the Middle East, which nobody wants, it's going to take our eye off the ball of a much bigger problem.
So, Seth,
there are a lot of implications here.
Yeah. So, Seth, I guess the big question is this then. Why? In your estimation, I'm sure you've spoken to plenty of your colleagues on the Democratic side about this, and perhaps people on the right as well. Why then? Why would the president do this? Do you think he did it for distractionary purposes? Do you think he did it because it was an impulse decision, because Iran was testing his patience? Why do you think Donald Trump did this?
I sure as hell can't read this guy's mind. I don't think anybody can. He's tweeted himself a lot about creating a war with Iran to distract from political problems. He accused President Obama of doing that. Of course, he never did. So he obviously knows that strategy well. I don't know if he did it here or not, but I know that he's familiar with it. Mm-hmm. My guess is he just wanted to act like a tough guy. I mean, this is a weak, draft-dodging president who's constantly trying to prove his manhood. And he thought by just taking this terrorist leader out, it would make him look good. I mean, maybe that sounds crass, but this is how Donald Trump operates, and everybody knows that.
Do you think that Iran was involved in this at all, that they tipped off the United States because he wasn't as liked as people say he was in Iran?
Wait, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Iran was involved with what?
With the death of Soleimani. Do you think that Iran tipped off the United States as far as his location?
Oh, no. We've got good intelligence. We know where these figures are. Mm-hmm. The irony here is that one of the many consequences of this, which is bad for us in our long-term Iran policy, is that taking out Soleimani has empowered the hardliners. It's made a martyr out of someone who was a strong anti-American hardliner in the Iranian government. And the sad irony is that just 2 weeks ago, there were all these protests against people like Soleimani. And then Soleimani and his thugs went and killed a bunch of Iranian civilians.
Right.
So that was really good for us because it gave us a chance that maybe some moderates would have more influence in the Iranian regime and they'd soften their behavior. Instead, Trump has turned that all around. It's done the same thing in Iraq, by the way. Iraq is a very important anti-ISIS base.
Yeah,
we need to have troops there to fight terror. Iraqis were protesting against Iranian meddling in their government. They were trying to kick Iran out of Iraq, which is a dream come true for us. Mm-hmm. Now, thanks to the president's actions, all the protests in Iraq are about kicking America out.
Yeah, death to America. You're hundreds of thousands of people chanting death to America.
We don't have enough time on this show to go through all the ways in which the president's action has made America less safe, has taken a step back in the conflict that we have with Iran, and totally taken our eye off the ball with the real threats that America faces around the globe.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but it sounds a little bit like the Bush administration when we went to war in Iraq, or where you were, 4 tours in Iraq, where we didn't continue to go after Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Seth Moulton, a congressman, former presidential candidate, and a war hero. Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about.
Right, let me just put it. Let me just put that one on that point on Bush. Let me just put it this way.
Sure.
The only thing worse than an unnecessary war in Iraq is an unnecessary war in Iraq that Iran wins. And that's where this is headed, thanks to President Trump.
Boy, I wish I didn't have to hear you make a statement like that, but sadly, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. I want to ask you quickly about Ilhan Omar. I'm sure you don't agree with everything she says. Neither do I.
No.
But, as a child, she talked a little bit about how she still has PTSD, and she got it because of the actions that were taking place in the Middle East. I know that some veterans are very upset with that comment that she made, talking about how this attack brought back, her PTSD. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's fair to criticize her for that?
No, because people get post-traumatic stress from all sorts of things. People get post-traumatic stress from really bad auto accidents. People get post-traumatic stress from growing up in broken families. I've been very open about my post-traumatic stress from fighting in Iraq and how I've dealt with that and how I've managed it and taken care of it. That's a type of PTS that people are very familiar with, and veterans in particular know all about. But there are other types too.
One more question about this situation in Iran, and then we haven't even brought up impeachment yet. Crazy enough. But what is your definition, Seth, of an imminent threat? Because, we hear all these different definitions from people in the White House. As someone who served, what is your definition of what an imminent threat would be?
A new and immediate threat to American lives. So let me put this in terms that people can understand. Some Pompeo keeps talking about how the Baghdad embassy is going to be under attack.
Right.
Okay, listen, folks. The Baghdad embassy has been under attack for 15 years. 10 years ago, they were getting, 10 times as many rockets as they are right now. And this administration is trying to trump up this threat to make a big deal of what Iran's doing. Look, I don't think Iran or Iraqi militia should be shooting anything at the Baghdad embassy. Of course not. But you've got to put this in perspective. The Baghdad embassy has been under attack ever since America's Baghdad embassy existed there. We took it seriously, but we didn't blow it out of proportion. They get a few rockets a few months ago, and all of a sudden Pompeo says, "Oh my God, this is so serious. Every American has to leave," and he's pulling people out of the Baghdad embassy. Listen, I was there in 2005, and we were going to the swimming pool while they were under attack. We just, we're smart about it. We do this, I'll show you pictures of me at the swimming pool at the Baghdad embassy when they were getting a hell of a lot more.
We are holding you to that. We have to get those pictures, Seth. We'll send them to us.
For the record, I'd rather see Seth in the swimming pool than Donald Trump.
That's
true. We won't go there. Go ahead, JD.
Seth, in your opinion, you mentioned how if American lives are at threat for it to be considered an imminent threat, does that include weaponry, assets?
Oh, weaponry, assets. If it's important stuff, sure. If it's really valuable stuff. But look, I have yet to see any evidence of some new imminent attack. And if the administration has that, then let's show it. But, right after this attack, the Vice President Pence, who's, not exactly about to win a MacArthur Genius Grant, but he goes out there and says that, we had to attack Iran because they sponsored 9/11. It's just completely false.
Yeah, and
the
didn't
point
he say
is that they don't have their story straight because they're trying to make it up as they go.
Exactly. Didn't he say there were 12 terrorists when there were like 17 or 18 terrorists? The guy doesn't even know how many terrorists attacked us on 9/11, and he's the vice president of the United States. I want to ask you a little bit. It's insane, Seth. I want to ask you a little bit about the impeachment articles. Pelosi did say that she will send the impeachment articles to the Senate soon. Can you just give me your opinions on when do you think she's going to send these articles? Have you spoken to her and some of your colleagues? And, do you think this is the right move? Can you talk a little about strategically why she's doing this?
Well, what she's been trying to do is make sure the Senate has a fair trial. And I guess she's decided that, she's pushed the issue enough. Bolton has come out and said that he wants to testify, and there are other people, American public opinion is strongly on the side of having a fair trial. American public opinion says you can't have a trial without witnesses. Americans across the board, Democrats and Republicans alike, want to hear John Bolton's testimony. They want to hear what was going on in there in the administration, in the White House. So I think she's been smart to hold off a little bit here, but we can't hold off forever. And what I've heard is that she wants to set him next week. What goes
through your mind when you see Mitch McConnell go into the White House and have private meetings with Donald Trump before this Senate trial begins?
Well, this is the problem here, is that Mitch McConnell is throwing the Constitution out the window. And I don't care what your politics are. I don't care whether you're the biggest Trump fan or the biggest Trump hater. We all in America ought to support the Constitution. The oath I swore when I came into Congress, which is the same oath that Mitch McConnell swore, was not to protect the president, was not to protect the Speaker of the House, was not to protect my political party. It was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And by the way, the same oath, word for word, that I swore as a United States Marine. So we owe it to all those troops on the front lines who are literally putting their lives on the line for our Constitution, to uphold the Constitution in Washington, D.C. And Mitch McConnell refuses to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. It's a travesty. It really is. Seth, you are a hero, my friend, and we love you, and we're so glad that you're continuing to serve this country and doing what you do for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us. Always appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I love you guys, too. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Seth. Be safe.
Right.
Be safe, my friend. We'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Seth.
Okay.
There you go. I just love that guy. Not only is he a war hero, he's extremely intelligent. He's thoughtful. He's compassionate. And what better person to talk about this issue? This is a guy who was on the front lines. Yeah, by the way, we're going to talk about, when you're going to talk about cowards, let's talk about Doug Collins, the coward. He never served, but he wants to tell us that the Democrats are, that they're compassionate for this general. No, what Seth Moulton just said is the way Democrats feel. I think he speaks for Democrats when he says, and he says it very simply put, this guy was a horrible guy.
What he said
I am
is
celebrating the fact that this guy was killed, but it was the wrong decision.
What he said is what reasonable Democrats feel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unreasonable Democrats out there as well, though, Brian. I'm not certain that they would say the same thing that Seth Moulton just said.
Okay.
All I can say about this War Powers Resolution Act is that it doesn't put Donald Trump in a position any less than Barack Obama or John F. Kennedy or any president before Donald Trump as far as what they can do in relation to war. Now, if Donald Trump was doing something that he shouldn't have done as far as killing someone or not following the rules of engagement, as long as he isn't taken behind the eight ball with all those former presidents, I have no problem with this. If he went outside of the lines and they're just and the War Power Resolution Act, all it does is it makes sure that he follows the same protocol that those presidents followed, then I have no issue.
All right, well, I want to challenge you.
But if he loses any of that compared to any other president, then I have a giant issue with this.
Okay. Well, I want to challenge you on something, because when I talk about an unreasonable Republican, I give you reasons why I feel that way.
Sure.
You just mentioned unreasonable Democrats. Yes, I do think there are unreasonable Democrats out there, just like there are unreasonable Republicans. However, I'll ask you this question. Can you find me one unreasonable Democrat that is in Congress right now that has actually said that they are mourning the loss of this general in Iran?
Well,
one.
Obviously, you can't say no.
So why is it that Republicans are lying then?
You could say Ilhan Omar is probably the only is probably the only one who's, and no one's
that's
actually
not true.
And again, no one's actually said I mourn the loss, and no one is. I don't think anyone's stupid enough
then
to make a statement like that.
Doug Collins made that statement. Do you want me to play it again? Play the audio.
I'm not talking about the Republicans. I'm talking about. I don't think there's any Democrats stupid enough to make that statement.
Okay.
Brian.
Well, I want you to hear this again.
So don't jump all over me without listening to what I have to say.
I listened to what you said.
No,
but
you didn't. You just jumped all over me.
I want you
to
hear this audio again.
I don't think that any Democrat would be stupid enough, as representative of the United States, to make a statement like we're mourning the death of a terrorist.
Okay, well, I want you to hear Doug Collins.
And that's fine.
Because he thinks they're Democrats that are doing that.
Then Doug Collins is wrong and out of line.
I want you to hear this audio.
That's fine.
Here's Doug Collins.
I did not think she could become more hypocritical than she was during impeachment. But guess what? Surprise, surprise. Nancy Pelosi does it again, and her Democrats fall right in line. One, they're in love with terrorists. We see that. They mourn Soleimani more than they mourn our Gold Star families, who are the ones who suffered under Soleimani. That's a problem.
Now, this is a man who's an elected official.
I understand.
And by the way, Nikki Haley and Stephanie Grisham echoed that same sentiment. Now, obviously, I know you don't agree with that.
Well, how can I?
The point
it's simply not true.
Okay, but it's harmful and it's dangerous when Republicans make ignorant statements like that. I'm sure you would agree with that.
I think what he was trying to say.
Oh boy.
What do you know, boy? Is that he's. At least I'm very unhappy with the way that this is being handled by the Democrats, because this is a good thing. It's a good thing that Soleimani is dead, and they're just trying to find a way to attack Donald Trump for not handling it exactly by the book, despite the fact that he did kill a career terrorist.
I'm glad we agree on that. That is an irresponsible statement to make. All right, when we come back, this is going to be an interesting interview. We've heard of the man Tacoma Wesley. Police say he caused an accident at Durango and Desert Inn that killed 4 people, including himself. His brother's going to come in studio, who's mourning the loss, of course, of a member of his family. His name is Talib Kearns. We appreciate the fact that he's decided to come in studio and talk about this very difficult subject. Talib will be joining us next. You're listening to The Vegas Take.